and her velvet sky strewn with stars, the eternal dawn glided through the inky waters of the Caribbean, her timbers creaking like a whispered lullaby. The brigantine, weathered by years of salt and storm, cut a solitary path through the night, her sails catching the faint breath of a trade wind. Lanterns swayed gently on deck, casting pools of amber light that danced with the rhythm of the waves. The sea stretched endless, a mirror of stars above, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish or the sigh of a swell kissing the hull. The air carried the tang of salt, and the faint musk of damp wood, a scent that clung to every man aboard, binding them to this life of wind and water. At the helm stood Captain Nathaniel Vane, a man whose eyes held the weight of storm clouds, gray and restless, his hands calloused from years, gripping ropes and swords, traced the worn edges of an ancient map spread across a barrel beside the wheel. The parchment was brittle, its edges curling like the claws of some forgotten beast, inked with cryptic runes and faded lines that spoke of places no sane navigator would seek. Nathaniel's coat, once a fine black velvet, was now frayed at the cuffs, its silver buttons dulled by salt. A tricorn hat sat low on his brow, shadowing a face carved by time and regret. He was not old, not in years, but his soul bore the scars of a man who had outlived his peace. Crew, a ragged assembly of sea dogs and wanderers, moved about their task with the quiet rhythm of men accustomed to the night watch. The quartermaster, Amos Reed, a broad-shouldered man with a beard like tangled kelp, coiled a rope with deliberate care, his eyes flicking toward Nathaniel now and then. Amos was loyal, or so Nathaniel believed, but loyalty at sea was as fickle as the tide. Below deck, the cook, old Jim, muttered to himself as he stirred a pot of fish stew, his voice mingling with the creak of the ship and the distant cry of a gull. The navigator, Clara Wren, stood apart, her slim figure silhouetted against the rail as she studied the stars through a battered sextant. Clara was an enigma, her past as uncharted as the waters they sailed, but her skill with the stars had earned her a place aboard. Nathaniel's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a seamless black veil. For weeks, he had dreamed of this night, not the stars or the ship, but a voice, low and lilting, calling from the deep. It spoke no words he could recall, yet it stirred a longing he could not name. A pull toward something lost. The map, bartered from a half-mad merchant in Port Royal, promised answers. It spoke of the lost compass, a relic of legend said to point not to true north, but to the heart's deepest desire. Some called it a myth, others a curse. Nathaniel cared little for the tales. He sought the truth behind them, a truth that might quiet the ghosts of his past, years ago, in a life before the eternal dawn. Nathaniel had been a man of promise, a merchant's son with a wife and a daughter waiting in Bristol, but ambition had led him to sea and betrayal had followed. A deal struck with a rival captain, a cargo of stolen goods, and a night of fire and blood had cost him everything. His family was gone, their home reduced to ash, and Nathaniel had fled to the Caribbean, a fugitive from his own conscience. The sea had become his penance, the eternal dawn his prison. Yet the dreams, the voice, the map, the compass offered a flicker of redemption, or perhaps merely an end. Captain Amos's voice broke the silence, low and gravelly. He stood at Nathaniel's side, his hands resting on the barrel, fingers brushing the map. This course you've set, it takes us far from the trade lanes, past Tortuga, past the Caymans, into waters no chart knows. The men are whispering. Let them whisper, Nathaniel replied, his voice steady but soft, like the lap of waves. They signed the code. They follow where I lead. Amos's eyes narrowed, glinting in the lantern light. But men need more than codes to keep faith. They talk of curses, of islands that vanish with the dawn. And that map, he paused, his gaze lingering on the parchment. It ain't natural, Captain. Those marks, they glow sometimes. When the moon's high, Nathaniel's fingers tightened on the wheel. He had seen it too in the small hours when the crew slept and the sea was still. The runes, etched in ink older than the ship, shimmered faintly, as if kissed by starlight. He had told himself it was a trick of the mind, a reflection of his own weariness. But the dreams, the voice, they were no trick. The sea holds many secrets, Amos, he said. We've sailed through worse than whispers. Amos grunted, unconvinced, and turned back to his work. Nathaniel's eyes returned to the map, tracing a line that led to a speck marked only by a rune shaped like a spiraling wave, the lost compass. The merchant had said, lay on an island that appeared only to those who sought it with purpose. Nathaniel's purpose was clear, though he shared it with no one, to find what he had lost or to lay it to rest. The night deepened, the stars burning brighter, as clouds parted like a curtain. Clara unlowered her sextant and approached the helm, her boots soft on the deck. The stars align with the map, she said. Her voice calm but edged with something Nathaniel couldn't place: caution, perhaps, or curiosity. We're on course, but the waters ahead, they're uncharted. The currents shift in ways no logbook records. Nathaniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Keep us true, Clara. The sea will show us the way. She lingered a moment, her dark eyes searching his face, then returned to her post. The ship creaked on, the waves whispering secrets to the hull. Old Jim's voice drifted up from below, a low chant in a tongue none recognized, mingling with the clatter of pots. The crew worked in silence, but their glances spoke of unease, of stories told in Nassau's taverns, of ships lost to fog and shadow, of compasses that spun without reason. As the hours passed, a faint mist began to rise from the sea, curling like smoke around the eternal dawn. It was not the thick fog of the coast, but a delicate veil, shimmering faintly as if woven from moonlight. Nathaniel's breath caught as he saw at a flicker on the horizon, a pale green light that pulsed once, then vanished. He blinked, wondering if it was another trick of the night. But Clara's sharp intake of breath told him she had seen it too. Captain, she called softly, pointing toward the spot where the light had been. That was no star. Before Nathaniel could answer, a sound rose from the deep, a low, mournful hum, like the song of a distant whale, yet sharper, more human. It wove through the creak of the ship, the slap of waves, until it seemed to come from within the very timbers. The crew froze, hands pausing on ropes, eyes darting to the dark water below. Old Jim emerged from the galley, his weathered face pale, a ladle still clutched in his hand. "'Tis the sea herself," he whispered, his voice trembled. "She's calling us." Nathaniel's hand tightened on the wheel, his heart a steady drum against the rising unease. He had heard such sounds before, in dreams that left him waiting with salt on his lips. "Steady, lads," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The sea sings to all who sail her. It's no curse, only her voice." But as he spoke, the green light flickered again, closer now, dancing just beyond the mist. It moved like a lantern held aloft, swaying with the rhythm of the waves. The crew watched silent as the light pulsed once more, then faded into the dark. The hum ceased, leaving only the familiar sounds of the ship, the groan of wood, the rustle of canvas, the endless breath of the sea. Nathaniel stared into the night, the map's runes burning in his mind. The eternal dawn sailed on, her boat cutting through the mist, toward a horizon that held both promise and shadow. The stars above watched in silence, their light a guide, their secrets locked in the deep. And somewhere, in the heart of the sea, a voice waited, calling Nathaniel Vane to his fate. The eternal dawn sailed through the thinning mist, her sails taut against a breeze that carried the faint scent of land, damp earth, and wild jasmine woven with the ever-present salt. Dawn was hours away, and the Caribbean night draped the ship in a cloak of stars, their reflections shimmering on the glassy sea. The creak of the brigantine's timbers blended with the soft slap of waves, a rhythm as familiar to the crew as their own heartbeats. Lanterns hung from the rigging, their glow casting long shadows that swayed with the ship's gentle roll. The air was warm, heavy with the promise of a distant storm. Though the sky remained clear, a canvas of endless black pricked by silver dot, Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, though his eyes betrayed a restlessness. The green light from hours before lingered in his mind, its pulse a riddle he could not unravel. The ancient map lay folded in his coat, its runes a silent weight against his chest. He had not spoken of the light to the crew, nor of the mournful hum that had risen from the deep. Such things bred fear, and fear on a ship was a spark in a powder keg. Yet the crew's silence told him they felt it to the unease that clung to the eternal dawn like damp fog. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, leaned against the mainmast, sharpening a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. The rasp of steel on whetstone cut through the night, a counterpoint to the sea's whispers. His eyes, hidden beneath the brim of his hat, flicked toward Nathaniel, then away. Amos was a man of few words, but his silence spoke volumes. The crew trusted him, perhaps more than their captain, and Nathaniel knew it. Trust was a currency hard-earned at sea, and his own had been spent long ago. Clara Wren, the navigator, stood at the bow, her sextant glinting as she measured the stars. Her dark hair was tied back, loose strands catching the lantern light like threads of night. She had charted their course through the straits of Tortuga, a narrow passage flanked by jagged reefs and shadowed caves. The straits were a haven for pirates, a place where ships vanished and stories were born. Clara's voice, when she spoke, was calm, but Nathaniel sensed a tension in her, a wariness that mirrored his own. Old Jem, the cook, emerged from the galley, his apron stained with grease and salt. He carried a wooden tray of hardtack and dried fish, offering it to the crew with a toothless grin. "Eat, lads," he rasped, his voice like driftwood scraped by sand. "The sea's kind tonight, but she's a fickle mistress." The men took the food without comment, their eyes darting to the dark water beyond the rail. Jen's mutterings, half prayers, half curses, trailed off as he shuffled back below, leaving a faint scent of stew and rum in his wake. Nathaniel's gaze swept the horizon, where the first faint outline of land appeared, a low, jagged silhouette against the starlit sky. Tortuga lay ahead, its straits a gauntlet they must pass to reach the uncharted waters beyond. The map had marked this path, its spiraling rune glowing faintly in his memory, the lost compass. The merchant had whispered, waited on an island that shunned the light of day. Nathaniel cared little for the relic's power. He sought only the truth that might reveal a key to the dreams that haunted him, a voice from the deep, a shadow that called his name. "Captain," Clara's voice cut through his thoughts, soft but urgent. She stood beside him now, her sextant tucked under her arm. "The straits are close. The currents here are treacherous, and the reef sharper than a cutlass. We'll need steady hands and sharp eyes." Nathaniel nodded, his fingers tightening on the wheel. "Keep us true, Clara. The stars haven't failed us yet." She hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "The stars are steady, but the sea—" She lowered her voice, glancing at the crew. "The men are uneasy, Nathaniel. That light last night, that sound, it's got them spooked. They're whispering of sirens, of ships that sail with no crew." "Let them whisper," Nathaniel said, his tone calm but firm. "The sea tells tales to test us. We've sailed through worse." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said no more. Returning to her post, the eternal dawn pressed on, the straits drawing nearer, their dark waters glinting like polished obsidian. The air grew thicker, the scent of land stronger now, mangroves and mud with a faint tang of smoke from distant fires. Tortuga was a lawless place, a nest of pirates and smugglers. But Nathaniel had no intention of stopping. The map urged him onward, its secrets a beacon in the night. As the ship entered the straits, the sea narrowed, hemmed by low quays and coral reefs that gleamed like teeth in the starlight. The wind dropped, the sails sagging as the current took hold, pulling the eternal dawn through the passage. The crew moved with quiet precision, adjusting ropes and sails. their breaths held as the ship grazed past a reef, its jagged edge scraping the hull with a sound like a sigh. Nathaniel's hands were steady, but his heart quickened, the map's weight a reminder of the stakes. Then it came again, the green light, faint but unmistakable, flickering on the starboard side. Just beyond the low cave, it pulsed once, twice, then vanished, leaving only the dark. The crew froze, their hands pausing on ropes, their eyes wide. Amos's knife stilled, its blade glinting in the lantern light. Clara turned, her sextant forgotten, her gaze locked on the spot where the light had been. Captain Amos called, his voice low and taut. That ain't no lighthouse. Before Nathaniel could answer, the hum returned, a low, mournful sound that seemed to rise from the depths, weaving through the creak of the ship and the whisper of the current. It was no whale's song, no trick of the wind. It was human, yet not a voice that spoke of loss and longing. The crew's unease grew palpable, their hands tightening on ropes, their eyes darting to the water. Old Jen stumbled onto the deck, his tray clattering to the planks. "It's her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The Lady of the Deep. She calls to those who seek what's cursed." "Enough," Nathaniel snapped, his voice cutting through the tension. "It's the sea. Nothing more. Mind your posts, all of you." But as he spoke, the mist returned, thicker now, curling around the eternal dawn like a living thing. It was no ordinary fog, but a shimmering veil, its edges glinting with faint green sparks. The straits seemed to close in, the quays looming larger, their shadows twisting in the mist. The hum grew louder, its cadence shifting, as if forming words. Just beyond comprehension, Clara's hand gripped the rail, her knuckles pale. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look." He followed her gaze to the water, where the surface rippled, not with the current, but with a shape, a shadow beneath the waves, vast and formless, gliding alongside the ship. It was no shark, no whale, but something older, its presence a weight. In the air, the crew saw it too, their breaths catching, their hands frozen. Amos's knife slipped from his fingers, clattering to the deck. Nathaniel's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. "Hold fast," he called. "It's a trick of the light, a shadow of the reef. Keep to your work." The shadow lingered, pacing the ship, then sank into the deep, the ripples fading as if it had never been. The hum ceased, the mist thinning, but the green light flickered once more, farther ahead, beyond the straits. It swayed, as if beckoning, then vanished into the night. The eternal dawn sailed on, the straits widening, the sea opening before. Then once more, Nathaniel's hands remained on the wheel, but his mind raced. The map, the light, the voice, they were no coincidence. The lost compass was no mere relic. It was a key to something greater, something that stirred the sea itself. He glanced at Clara, her face pale but composed, then at Amos, who retrieved his knife with a scowl. Old Jim muttered prayers, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The stars burned above, their light a guide through the dark. The eternal dawn creaked, on her boat cutting through the waves, toward a fate that waited in the uncharted waters beyond. The straits of Tortuga fell behind, their shadows swallowed by the night. But the memory of the light, the hum, and the shadow lingered, a whisper of the sea's secrets, calling Nathaniel Vane to the heart of the unknown. The eternal dawn emerged from the straits of Tortuga as the first blush of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sea in hues of amber and rose. The brigantine's sails billowed gently, catching a morning breeze that carried the faint scent of seaweed and distant rain. The creak of her timbers mingled with the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull, a soothing cadence that belied the unease lingering among the crew. Lanterns still burned, their light fading against the growing day, casting soft shadows across the deck. The Caribbean stretched boundless before them, its waters a deep sapphire flecked with foam where the current stirred. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, though his eyes were heavy with the weight of a sleepless night. The green light, the mournful hum, and the shadow beneath the waves haunted his thoughts, their mystery a tide pulling at his mind. The ancient map, tucked inside his coat, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its runes whispering of the lost compass, a relic that promised truth, or perhaps only torment. Nathaniel's past clung to him like damp salt, memories of betrayal and loss that no sea could wash away. Yet the dreams, the voice from the deep, the shadow that called his name drove him forward, toward waters uncharted by any chart. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood near the mainmast, his broad frame casting a long shadow as he polished a brass spyglass. His movements were deliberate, but his eyes flicked toward Nathaniel with a wariness that had grown since the straits. The crew trusted Amos, his steady hand a counterpoint to Nathaniel's quiet intensity, but trust was a fragile thing, easily eroded by whispers of curses and strange lights. Below deck, old Jim's voice drifted up a low chant mixing with the clatter of pots, his words a blend of prayer and sailor's lore. Clara Wren, the navigator, stood at the rail, her sextant idle as she gazed at the horizon, her face unreadable. Her skill had guided them through the straits, but her silence spoke of doubts she did not voice. The map had led them here to a stretch of open sea far from the trade lanes, where the water was deep and the currents unpredictable. Nathaniel had traced its spiraling rune to a point marked only by a cryptic symbol, a circle pierced by 3 lines, like a star fallen to the sea, the lost compass. The merchant in Port Royal had said, lay on an island that appeared only to those who sought it with purpose, but the sea around them was empty, a vast mirror reflecting the sky's slow brightening. Nathaniel's purpose was clear, to find redemption, or at least an answer to the voice that called him in dreams, but the crew's faith was waning. Captain Amos's voice broke the morning's quiet, low and gruff. He approached the helm, spyglass in hand, his beard catching the first rays of sunlight. The men are restless. That light in the straits, that sound it's got 'em spooked. They're talking of turning back to Nassau. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the sea, his voice calm but firm. They signed the code, Amos. They sail where I'll lead. Amos said, his tone heavy with unspoken words. But codes don't quiet ghosts, Captain, nor maps that glow in the dark. Nathaniel's hand tightened on the wheel, the memory of the map's shimmering runes sharp in his mind. He had seen it too. In the small hours, when the crew slept, and the stars burned bright. The sea tests us, he said, always has. We'll find what we seek, or we'll find nothing. Either way, we sail on. Amos grunted, his eyes narrowing, but he said no more. Returning to his post, the eternal dawn pressed forward, her bow cutting through the waves, the horizon unbroken save for a faint haze where sea met sky. Clara approached, her boots soft on the deck, her dark eyes scanning the water. The currents are shifting, she said, her voice steady but laced with caution. We're close to the point on your map, but there's no land in sight, only deep water, deeper than any chart I've seen. Deep water holds secrets. Nathaniel replied, his gaze fixed. Ahead, keep your eyes sharp. Clara, the sea will show us the way. She nodded, but her silence lingered, heavy as the morning air. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, adjusting sails and checking lines, their movements mechanical but their glances uneasy. Old Jim emerged from the galley, carrying a bucket of fish bones to toss overboard, his muttered prayers trailing like smoke. The sea's watching, he said to no one, his eyes darting to the water. She sees what we seek. The day wore on, the sun climbing higher, its heat tempered by the breeze. The eternal dawn sailed through waters that grew still, almost unnaturally so, the waves flattening to a glassy calm. Nathaniel felt it, a shift in the air, a weight that pressed against his chest, as if the sea itself held its breath. He reached into his coat, unfolding the map, its parchment warm against his fingers, the rune at its center, the circle pierced by 3 lines, seemed to pulse faintly, though no one else saw it. Captain! Clara's voice cut through the stillness, sharp with urgency. She stood at the bow, pointing to the starboard side. There beneath the water, Nathaniel followed her gaze, his breath catching. Below the surface, a faint glow shimmered, not green like the light in the straits, but a soft silver, like moonlight trapped in the deep. It pulsed slowly, outlining a shape a jagged mass, too regular to be a reef, too vast to be a wreck. The crew gathered at the rail, their work forgotten, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. "It's a ship," Amos said, his voice low, the spyglass pressed to his eye, "or what's left of one. Sunk, but not broken, the hull's intact, sitting on a ledge." Nathaniel's heart quickened. The map had led them here, to this forgotten place, where the sea guarded its secrets. "Drop anchor," he ordered. "We'll dive, if there's answers." "They're down there." The crew hesitated, their faces pale, but Amos barked orders, and the anchor chain rattled into the deep. Nathaniel selected 3 men, Amos, Clara, and a weary sailor named Tom, to join him. Old Jen stayed aboard, muttering of curses and sunken graves, his hands trembling as he clutched a rosary of knotted rope. The diving bell, a crude wooden barrel reinforced with iron, was lowered over the side, its ropes creaking as it sank into the glassy water. Nathaniel and Clara descended first, the bell's interior dim and damp, the sea's pressure a dull roar. In their ears, the silver glow grew brighter as they sank, illuminating a shipwreck draped in seaweed, its masts broken but its hull eerily preserved. Barnacles encrusted the wood, but the name carved into the bow was still legible, Silver Wraith. Nathaniel's breath caught. The Wraith was a legend, a pirate ship lost a century ago, said to have carried a cursed cargo that doomed its crew. The bell settled on the ledge, and Nathaniel and Clara stepped out, their boots sinking into the silty seabed. The water was cold, pressing against their oilskin suits, but the glow guided them, pulsing like a heartbeat. They moved toward the wreck, their lanterns casting beams through the murky water. The deck was littered with debris, broken barrels, tangled ropes, and the glint of scattered coins, but Nathaniel's eyes were drawn to the captain's cabin, its storage jar, the glow emanating from within. Inside, they found a chest, its iron bands rusted but intact, the silver light spilling from its seams. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he pried it open, revealing a small, ornate object, a compass, its face not of glass but of polished pearl, its needle spinning wildly, pointing nowhere and everywhere. The lost compass. But beside it lay something else, a leather-bound journal, its pages swollen but preserved, marked with the same spiraling rune as the map. Clara's hand grazed the compass, and the glow flared, the water around them humming with that mournful sound from the straits. Nathaniel grabbed the journal, tucking it into his coat, but as he reached for the compass, a shadow moved beyond the cabin, a vast, formless shape gliding through the wreck, its edges blurring into the dark. Clara gasped, her lantern shaking, but Nathaniel pulled her back, his voice steady. "We have what we came for." Back to the bell they ascended, the compass and journal clutched tightly, the shadow fading into the deep. On deck the crew gathered, their eyes wide as Nathaniel held up the compass, its needle still spinning, defying the stars above. Amos's face darkened, his hand resting on his knife. "That's no natural thing, Captain. You've brought a curse aboard." "It's a key," Nathaniel said, his voice calm but unyielding. "To what? We'll learn. Set sail, Amos. We follow the map." The eternal dawn raised anchor, her sails catching the breeze as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sea. The compass spun in Nathaniel's hand, its needle a restless spirit, and the journal's pages whispered of secrets yet to be read. The crew worked in silence, their glances heavy with doubt. But the ship sailed on, toward a horizon, where the sea and sky blurred, and the voice from the deep waited, calling them into the unknown. The eternal dawn carved a solitary path through the Caribbean, her sails catching a fitful breeze as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sea in shades of violet and gold. The brigantine's timbers droned softly, a familiar lullaby woven with the rhythmic slap of waves against her hull. Lanterns swayed from the rigging, their amber glow casting flickering shadows across the deck, where the crew moved with the quiet efficiency of men bound to the sea. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of salt and the faint tang of tar, but A chill lingered in the hearts of those aboard, stirred by the relic now locked in the captain's cabin. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood alone at the stern, the lost compass in his hand, its pearl face glinting in the lantern light. The needle spun erratically, heedless of the stars above, as if drawn by a force no chart could name. The leather-bound journal from the Silver Wraith lay open on a crate beside him, its pages brittle but legible, inscribed with cryptic notes and sketches of runes that matched those on the ancient map. Nathaniel's eyes, gray as a storm's edge, traced the words seeking answers to the dreams that haunted him, a voice from the deep, a shadow that knew his name, his past. A tapestry of betrayal and loss weighed heavier now, the compass a promise of redemption or ruin. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, leaned against the mainmast, his broad hands idle for once, his gaze fixed on Nathaniel. The crew had grown quieter since the dive. Their whispers of curses and ghosts now tinged with fear of the compass. Amos's loyalty was a rock, but even rocks could crack under pressure, and Nathaniel sensed the strain in his quartermaster's silence. Clara Wren, the navigator, stood at the helm, her hands steady on the wheel, though her eyes darted to the horizon, searching for signs of the green light that had haunted their nights. Old Jem, the cook, remained below, his mutterings now constant drone, his prayers mingling with the creak of the ship and the sigh of the sea. The journal spoke of the Silver Wraith and its final voyage, a tale of greed and betrayal. Its captain, a man named Elias Crow, had sought the lost compass, believing it would lead to a treasure beyond gold, a truth that could defy death itself. But the journal hinted at a darker fate, a shadow that followed the ship, a voice that drove the crew to madness, and a final entry scrawled in trembling ink: "The sea claims what it hears." Nathaniel's fingers tightened on the compass, its needle spinning faster, as if stirred by the words. The map, still tucked in his coat, marked their course toward a rune-shaped point far from any known land, a place where the sea itself seemed to whisper. "Cap'n," Clara's voice broke the silence. Soft but steady, she approached, her sextant tucked under her arm, her dark hair catching the lantern light. "The stars are true, but the compass." She glanced at the spinning needle, her brow furrowing. "It points nowhere. And the map's rune, it's not on any chart. We're sailing blind." Nathaniel met her gaze, his voice calm but resolute. "The sea has its own charts, Clara. The compass will show us the way when the time comes." Her lips pressed into a thin line, doubt flickering in her eyes. "The crew's on edge, Nathaniel. That compass, the journal, they're saying it's cursed, like the Wraith." Amos heard Jen talking of mutiny last night, quiet-like, in the galley. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low. "Let them talk. Fear breeds words, not action. Keep us on course, Clara. The map hasn't failed us yet." She nodded, though her silence spoke of unease, and returned to the helm. The eternal dawn sailed on, the sea stretching endless before her, its surface a mirror of stars broken only by the occasional ripple. The crew worked in near silence, their hands steady but their glances heavy with suspicion. Old Jem emerged from the galley, his apron stained with fish blood, a tray of hardtack and rum in his hands. "Eat, lads," he rasped, his eyes darting to Nathaniel. "The sea's quiet, but she's listening." As night deepened, the air grew cooler, a faint mist rising from the water, curling around the ship like a lover's touch. Nathaniel retreated to his cabin, the compass and journal spread before him on a narrow desk. The lantern above swayed, casting shadows that danced across the pages. He traced a rune in the journal, a spiral pierced by a crescent, identical to one on the map. Beneath it, Elias Crow had written, "The compass speaks when the sea is still. Trust not its needle, but its song." Hawkins. Nathaniel's breath caught. Edward Hawkins, the pirate whose name was a legend in these waters, had sailed with Crow. Was this a clue or a warning? He leaned closer, the journal's ink faded but clear, its words a riddle. "The compass is no gift, but a debt. It finds what you seek, but takes what you are." Nathaniel's fingers brushed the compass, its needle trembling, and for a moment the cabin seemed to hum a low, mournful sound, like the voice from the straits. He shook his head, dismissing it as exhaustion, but the air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. A knock at the door startled him. Amos entered, his face grin, his hands clenched. "Captain, the men are gathering on deck. They want answers about the compass, the wreck, all of it. They're saying it's brought a shadow aboard." Nathaniel rose, tucking the compass into his coat, the journal under his arm. "Then I'll face them," he said, his voice steady but weary. On deck, the crew stood in a loose circle, their faces lit by lantern light, their eyes hard. Tom, the weary sailor, spoke first, his voice sharp. "That thing you brought up, it's no treasure, Captain. It's cursed. We saw the shadow in the water, heard the sea sing. We want it gone. It's a tool," Nathaniel said, holding up the compass, its needle spinning wildly. "A guide to what we seek. The map led us to the wraith, and it'll lead us further. You signed the code. You sail where I'll lead." Murmurs rippled through the crew, but Amos stepped forward, his voice low. "Code or no, Captain, men don't follow what they fear. Throw it overboard or we'll do it ourselves." Nathaniel's hand rested on his cutlass, but his voice remained calm. "The compass stays. It's our course. Anyone who disagrees can swim to Nassau." The crew fell silent, their eyes darting to Amos, who said nothing, his face unreadable. The tension hung thick, broken only by the creak of the ship and the whisper of waves. Nathaniel returned to his cabin, locking the compass and journal away, but as he sat, the lantern flickered, and the runes on the journal seemed to glow a faint, silver light, pulsing like the sea's heartbeat. Outside, the mist thickened, curling around the eternal dawn like a shroud. The stars dimmed, their light swallowed by the haze, and from the deep came that sound again, a low hum, almost words, weaving through the ship's timbers. Nathaniel's hand tightened on the compass, its needle spinning faster, as if drawn to the horizon. The eternal dawn sailed on, her bow cutting through the mist, toward a rune-marked point where the sea held its secrets, and the voice from the deep whispered, calling Nathaniel Vane to his fate. The eternal dawn glided through a sea as still as glass, her sails hanging limp in the absence of wind. The Caribbean night draped the brigantine in a shroud of stars, their light fractured on the water's surface, a mosaic of silver and shadow. The ship's timbers creaked softly, a mournful song blending with the gentle lap of waves against her hull. Lanterns swung from the rigging, casting pools of amber light that danced across the deck, where the crew moved with the quiet and ease of men who felt the sea's eyes upon them. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of salt, and a faint, inexplicable sweetness, like flowers blooming in the deep. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, though his gray eyes were clouded with doubt. The lost compass, now locked in a wooden box in his cabin, seemed to hum in his mind, its spinning needle a restless spirit. The journal from the silver wraith lay beside it, its pages a labyrinth of cryptic warnings and sketches of runes that glowed. In the dark, Nathaniel's past, a betrayal that cost him his family, a life burned to ash pressed against him, heavier now with the crew's growing distrust. The voice from the deep, the shadow that haunted his dreams, drove him onward toward a rune-marked point on the map where answers, or oblivion, waited. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood by the mainmast, his broad frame tense, his hands gripping a coiled rope as if anchoring himself against the unknown. His loyalty to Nathaniel had held firm, but cracks were forming, widened by the crew's whispers of curses and mutiny. Clara Wren, the navigator, leaned over the rail, her sextant idle, her dark eyes scanning the horizon for a sign of land the map promised but the sea withheld. Old Jim, the cook, shuffled across the deck, his apron stained with grease, muttering prayers to saints no one recognized. His voice mingled with the ship's creaks, a litany of fear that set the crew's nerves on edge. The map, spread out in Nathaniel's cabin, had led them here, to a stretch of open water far beyond the straits of Tortuga, where no chart marked land or reef. The rune at its center, a spiral pierced by a crescent, had glowed faintly the night before, as if stirred by the compass's presence. Nathaniel had traced its lines, his fingers trembling as the journal's words echoed in his mind. The compass speaks when the sea is still. Trust not its needle, but its song. The sea was still now, unnaturally so, and the compass's hum seemed to linger in the air. A faint vibration felt more than heard. Captain. Clara's voice cut through the silence, low and cautious. She approached the helm, her face pale in the lantern light. The stars are wrong tonight. They're shifting. I've checked the sextant thrice, but the constellations don't hold. And the sea, it's too quiet. Nathaniel's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the stars seemed to blur, their edges softened by a faint haze. The map brought us here, he said, his voice steady but soft, like the whisper of waves. The compass will show us the way. Clara's eyes narrowed, her hand tightening on the sextant. The crew's talking, Nathaniel. They say the compass is leading us to a grave, not an island. Amos heard Tom plotting with the others' quiet words about taking the ship. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. Let them plot. The sea will decide our course, not whispers. Keep your eyes on the stars, Clara. She lingered a moment, her gaze searching his face, then returned to her post. The eternal dawn drifted on, the sea a mirror beneath her, reflecting a sky that seemed to waver, as if painted on glass. The crew worked in silence, their hands steady but their glances heavy with fear. Old Jim paused by the galley door, his eyes darting to the water. She's watching us, he muttered, clutching a knotted rope rosary. The sea knows what we carry. As midnight approached, a faint mist rose from the water, curling around the ship like tendrils of smoke. It was no ordinary fog, but a shimmering veil, its edges glinting with faint silver sparks, like the glow from the silver wraith. Nathaniel felt it, a shift in the air, a weight that pressed against his chest, as if the sea held its breath. He reached for the compass, now in his hand, its needle spinning wildly, then slowing, pointing not north, but toward a point on the horizon where the mist was thickest. And ho! Tom's voice rang out, sharp and startled, from the crow's nest. The crew rushed to the rail, their eyes wide as a shape emerged from the mist, a low, jagged-out line, too solid for a cloud, too fleeting for land. It was an island, its shores fringed with mangroves, its center crowned by a single, twisted tree that seemed to claw at the sky. The stars above it shimmered, as if seen through warped glass, and the sea around it was still, a perfect mirror of the night. Nathaniel's heart quickened. The map had promised this an island that appeared only to those who sought it with purpose. But as the eternal dawn drew closer, the island seemed to flicker, its edges blurring as if it existed only in the corner of the eye. The compass's needle steadied, pointing directly at the tree, its pearl face glowing faintly, a match to the runes in the journal. Drop anchor, Nathaniel ordered, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. We'll go ashore at dawn. Amos stepped forward, his face grinned. Captain, that ain't no island. It's a trick, a ghost. The men won't set foot on it. Nathaniel met his gaze, his voice unyielding. Then they'll stay aboard. The compass led us here, Amos. I'll see what it hides. The crew exchanged glances, their hands tightening on ropes and knives. Clara's voice was low, almost a whisper. Nathaniel, the journal warned of debts, not treasures. Whatever's there, it's not what you think. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on the island, its silhouette wavering in the mist. The anchor chain rattled, the sound echoing across the still water. And the eternal dawn came to rest. The night deepened, the mist thickening, and from the island came a sound, a low, lilting hum, like the voice from the straits weaving through the ship's timbers. It was no whale's song, but a melody of loss and longing, almost words calling to Nathaniel alone. He retreated to his cabin, the compass and journal spread before him. The lantern above flickered, casting shadows that danced across the rooms. He opened the journal, its pages trembling in his hands, and found a new entry, one he hadn't seen before. written in Elias Crow's shaking script. The island is no haven, but a mirror. It shows what you seek, but takes what you are. Beside, it was a sketch of the twisted tree, its branches curling like the runes on the map. A chill ran through him, but he pushed it aside, locking the compass and journal away. On deck, the crew stood watch, their eyes on the island, their hands on their weapons. The mist swirled, the hum growing louder, and in the distance, the twisted tree seemed to sway. Though no wind stirred the air, Nathaniel returned to the helm, his hand on the wheel, the compass's hum a pulse in his chest. The eternal dawn waited, her lanterns dim against the mist, her crew silent but for old Jim's prayers. The island loomed, its shores fading and reforming, a specter born of sea and starlight. The voice from the deep sang on, its melody a thread tying Nathaniel to the unknown, pulling him toward a truth he could not yet name. The ship creaked, the sea whispered, and the night stretched on, heavy with secrets, as the eternal dawn sailed no closer, yet no farther from the island that wasn't. The eternal dawn lay anchored in a sea as still as a hell breath, her sails furled under a sky where stars flickered like dying embers. The Caribbean night enveloped the brigantine, the air thick with the scent of salt, and the strange, sweet undertone that clung to the mist. The ship's timbers droned softly, a weary song harmonizing with the faint lap of waves against her hull. Lanterns hung from the rigging, their amber glow casting trembling shadows across the deck, where the crew stood in an easy silence, their eyes drawn to the island that wavered in the distance, its twisted tree a dark claw against the horizon. The mist swirled, silver flecked, as if the sea itself were exhaling secrets. Captain Nathaniel Vane gripped the wheel, his hand steady but his heart heavy with the weight of the unknown. The lost compass, locked in his cabin, seemed to pulse. In his mind, its spinning needle a restless echo of the dreams that haunted him, a voice from the deep, a shadow that whispered his name. The journal from the Silver Wraith, its pages filled with Elias Crow's cryptic warnings, lay beside it, its runes glowing faintly in his memory. Nathaniel's past betrayal, loss. A family reduced to ash pressed against him, a tide that no sea could wash away. The island, promised by the map, was no haven but a mirror, reflecting desires and debts in equal measure. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood by the rail, his broad frame tense, his hands clenching a rope as if to anchor himself against the crew's growing fear. His loyalty to Nathaniel was a fraying thread, strained by whispers of mutiny and the compass's unnatural hum. Clara Wren, the navigator, leaned over a chart spread across a barrel, her sextant idle, her dark eyes scanning the sea for a sign of the island's true nature. Old Jim, the cook, huddled near the galley, his knotted rope rosary clutched tightly, his mutterings now a ceaseless prayer to ward off the sea's wrath. The crew moved with mechanical precision, their hands on ropes and sails, but their glances were heavy with dread, their voices hushed. The map had led them to this place, a rune-marked point where the sea was still and the stars wavered. That journal's words echoed in Nathaniel's mind. The island is no haven but a mirror. It shows what you seek, but takes what you are. The lost compass, with its pearl face and spinning needle, had pointed to the island, but its shore seemed to shift, fading and reforming like a dream half remembered. Nathaniel had planned to go ashore at dawn, but the night felt alive, the mist of veil hiding truths he both sought and feared. Captain Amos's voice broke the silence, low and taut. As he approached the helm, the men won't stand for this much longer. That island, it ain't right. It's there, then it ain't, and that compass, it's stirring something in the sea. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the horizon, where the island's silhouette flickered in the mist. The compass is our guide, Amos, he said, his voice calm but unyielding. It led us to the wraith, to the journey. It'll lead us to the truth. Amos's eyes narrowed, his beard catching the lantern light. Truth or curse, Captain, the men don't care. They're talking of taking the ship, set in course for Port Royal. I can hold him, but not forever. Nathaniel's hand tightened on the wheel, but he kept his voice steady. then hold them till dawn. We'll see what the island holds, Amos grunted, his face grim, and turned back to the crew. Nathaniel glanced at Clara, who met his eyes with a look that spoke of doubt and determination. The sea's too still, she said softly, her hands tracing the chart. No current, no wind. It's as if the world's waiting for something. Before Nathaniel could reply, a cry from the crow's nest cut through the night. Ship, to starboard. Tom's voice was sharp with panic, and the crew rushed to the rail, their eyes wide. Nathaniel followed their gaze, his breath catching as a shape emerged from the mist of ship, its sails tattered, its hull black as pitch, gliding silently across the water. No lanterns burned on its deck, no crew moved in its rigging, yet it sailed with purpose, its bow cutting the still sea without a ripple. The shadow ship, old Jim whispered, his voice trembling as he clutched his rosary. The Wraith herself, come to claim us. Nathaniel's heart pounded, but he forced his voice to remain steady. It's a trick of the mist, nothing more. Hold your posts, all of you. But the ship drew closer, its silhouette sharp against the starlight, its masts twisted like the island's tree. The compass in Nathaniel's hand grew warm, its needle spinning wildly, then stopping, pointing directly at the shadow ship. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, and from the deep came that sound again, the mournful hum, now sharper, almost words, weaving through the eternal dawn's timbers like a lullaby from a grave. Clara's hand gripped the rail, her face pale. Nathaniel, it's no trick. That ship, it's not on the water. It's in it like the shadow we saw at the wreck. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. The journal had spoken of a shadow that followed the Silver Wraith, a debt that claimed its crew. He reached into his coat, pulling out the map, its runes glowing faintly in the lantern light, the spiral pierced by a crescent pulse. As if in rhythm with the shadow ship's approach, raise the anchor, he ordered, his voice cutting through the crew's fear. We'll outrun it. The crew hesitated, their eyes darting between Nathaniel and the shadow ship, but Amos barked orders, and the anchor chain rattled, its sound swallowed by the mist. The eternal dawn sails unfurled, catching a sudden breeze that stirred the sea, breaking its glassy calm. The shadow ship kept pace, its hull gliding without sound, its tattered sails unmoved by the wind. The hum grew louder, its melody twisting into a voice that seemed to call Nathaniel's name, a whisper from the deep that chilled his blood. Captain Amos said, his voice low, his hand on his cutlass. That thing ain't natural. It's tied to the compass, to you. Throw it overboard, or we're done. Nathaniel's hand tightened on the compass, its warmth a burn against his palm. It's our course, Amos, he said, his voice steady but weary. It's what we came for. The quartermaster's face darkened, but he said no more, turning to rally the crew. Clara took the wheel, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. The island's gone, she said, glancing at the horizon. It vanished when the ship appeared. Nathaniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the shadow ship. The eternal dawn sailed on, her bow cutting through the mist, but the shadow ship matched her speed, its presence a weight in the air. The hum faded, then surged, its words clearer now, a chant of loss and longing, a promise of truths buried in the sea. Nathaniel's heart ached, the voice stirring memories of a life lost, a family he could not save. As dawn approached, the mist began to thin, the stars burning brighter. The shadow ship slowed, its silhouette fading, as if sinking into the sea. The hum ceased, leaving only the familiar sounds of the eternal dawn, the creak of timbers, the rustle of sails, the whisper of waves. The crew stood silent, their eyes on the horizon, where the island had been and was no more. Nathaniel clutched the compass, its needle still, pointing now to a new rune on the map, a circle within a spiral, glowing faintly. The journal's warning echoed in his mind, the compass takes what you are. The eternal dawn sailed on, her course uncertain, her crew divided, but Nathaniel felt the pull of the sea, the voice that called him to a truth he could not yet name. The night stretched on, the stars a silent guide, as the ship moved deeper into the unknown, shadowed by secrets that refused to fade. The eternal dawn drifted through a Caribbean sea that shimmered under a canopy of stars, its surface a tapestry of silver and shadow. The brigantine's sails hung slack in the still air, her timbers creaking softly, a weary lullaby entwined with the gentle murmur of waves kissing her hull. Lanterns swayed from the rigging, their amber light casting trembling pools across the deck, where the crew moved with the hushed caution of men who felt the sea's gaze upon them. The air was warm, heavy with salt and a faint, haunting sweetness, like the breath of some ancient bloom hidden in the deep. The mist that had cloaked them for nights had thinned, but its memory lingered, a ghostly veil that seemed to watch and wait. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the stern, his hands clasped behind him, his gray eyes fixed on the horizon where the shadow ship had vanished at dawn. The lost compass, locked in his cabin, pulsed in his thoughts, its spinning needle a restless echo of the voice that haunted his dreams, a lilting call from the deep, a shadow that whispered his name. The journal from the silver wraith, its pages brittle with warnings and runes, lay beside it, its words a riddle Nathaniel could not yet unravel. His past betrayal, a family lost to fire and blood clung to him, a weight that grew heavier with each mile sailed. The map, tucked in his coat, marked their course toward a new lunar circle within a spiral, glowing faintly in his memory, promising answers or ruin. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood by the mainmast, his broad hands polishing a brass spyglass, his movements slow but tense. His loyalty to Nathaniel teetered, eroded by the crew's fear and the shadow ship's silent pursuit. Clara Wren, the navigator, sat cross-legged on the deck, a chart spread before her, her sextant glinting in the lantern light as she traced the stars. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed a wariness, a doubt that had grown since the island's disappearance. Old Jed, the cook, lingered near the galley, his knotted rope rosary clutched tightly, his mutterings now a fevered chant against the sea's mysteries. The crew worked in near silence, their hands steady but their glances heavy with suspicion, their voices hushed by the weight of the unknown. The journal had spoken of Elias Crow's doomed quest for the lost compass, a relic that promised truth but demanded a price. Its latest entry, scrawled in trembling ink, haunted Nathaniel. The sea sings to those who seek her secrets, but her song is a death. The shadow ship, the island that wasn't, the hum that wove through the eternal dawn's timbers, all were tied to the compass, to Nathaniel's purpose. He sought redemption, a way to quiet the ghosts of his past, but the sea seemed to demand more. Its voice a melody of loss and longing that called to him alone. Captain Clara's voice broke, the night's quiet, soft but edged with urgency. She approached, her chart rolled under her arm, her dark hair catching the lantern light. The stars are steady again, but the compass's course it's taken us deeper, past any known waters. The map's rune points to a place no chart records. Nathaniel nodded, his gaze still on the sea. The compass knows the way, Clara, he said, his voice calm but weary. It led us to the wraith, to the island. It'll lead us now. Her eyes searched his face, doubt flickering in their depths. The crew's at breaking point. Nathaniel, Tom's been stirring him up, talking of curses and ghosts. Amos says he's heard knives being sharpened in the dark. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low. Amos will hold them. The sea's testing us, Farah. We sail on. She hesitated, then nodded, returning to her post. The eternal dawn drifted, the sea a mirror beneath her, reflecting a sky where the stars seemed to pulse, as if in rhythm with the compass's hum. Old Jim emerged from the galley, a tray of hardtack and rum in his hands, his eyes darting to the water. She's singing tonight, he whispered, his voice trembling. The lady of the deep, calling us to her crypt. Nathaniel ignored him, his thoughts on the map's new rune. The journal had hinted at a place called the Siren's Crypt, a sunken reef where ships vanished and voices rose from the deep. The runa circle within a spiral matched a sketch in Elias Crow's hand, beside a warning. The crypt holds the sea's heart, but its song takes yours. Nathaniel's fingers brushed the compass through his coat, its warmth a faint burn as if it knew what lay ahead. As midnight passed, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, not green like the straits, nor silver like the wraith, but a soft blue like the heart of a flame. It pulsed slowly, a beacon in the dark, and the sea around it shimmered, as if lit from below. The crew gathered at the rail, their faces pale, their hands tightening on ropes and knives. Amos's spyglass glinted as he studied the glow, his voice low. "It's a reef, Captain, jagged as a devil's teeth, glowing like a witch's fire." Nathaniel's heart quickened. The map had led them here, to the Siren's crypt. "Drop anchor," he ordered. "We'll dive at first light." The crew hesitated, their eyes darting to Amos, who nodded grimly. The anchor chain rattled, its sound swallowed by the still sea, and the eternal dawn came to rest. The blue glow pulsed, its light weaving through the water, and from the deep came that sound again, the lilting hum, now clearer, almost a voice, singing words no one could grasp. It wove through the ship's timbers, a melody of sorrow and promise, stirring memories Nathaniel had buried deep. A wife's laughter, a daughter's smile, lost to fire and betrayal. "Captain," Amos said, his voice heavy as he approached the helm, "the men won't dive. They say the crypt's cursed, that the sea's singing for our souls." Nathaniel met his gaze, his voice unyielding. "Then I'll dive alone. The compass brought us here, Amos. I'll see what it hides." Clara stepped forward, her face resolute. "You won't go alone," she said. "I'll dive with you. The sea's secrets are mine to chart, too." Nathaniel nodded, gratitude flickering in his eyes. The night wore on, the blue glow steady, the hum a constant thread in the air. Old Jem's prayers grew louder, his rosary trembling in his hands. "Wow!" The crew stood watch, their eyes on the reef, their hearts heavy with fear. Nathaniel and Clara prepared the diving bell, its wooden frame creaking as it was readied over the side. At dawn they descended, the bell's interior dim and damp, the sea's pressure a dull roar in their ears. The blue glow grew brighter, illuminating a reef of jagged coral, its spires twisted like bones encrusted with shells that shimmered like pearls. At its center lay a cavern, its mouth a dark wound in the sea, the glow pulsing from within. Nathaniel and Clara stepped out, their boots sinking into the silty seabed, their lanterns casting beams through the murky water. Inside the cavern, they found a chamber, its walls carved with runes that matched the map, and journal spirals, crescents, circles within circles, glowing blue. At its heart stood a stone altar, and on it a small crystalline object, a shard, no larger than a dagger, its surface etched with the same runes, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. Nathaniel's breath caught. The journal had spoken of the sea's heart, a fragment tied to the compass's power. As Clara reached for the shard, the hum surged, its voice clear now, a woman's song, lilting and sorrowful, singing of loss and longing. The water trembled, and a shadow moved beyond the cavern, a vast, formless shape, gliding through the reef, its edges blurring into the dark. Nathaniel grabbed the shard, tucking it into his coat, and pulled Clara back. "We have it," said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Back to the bow they ascended, the shard's light dimming, the hum fading to a whisper. On deck the crew gathered, their eyes wide as Nathaniel held up the shard, its runes faintly glowing. Amos's face darkened, his hand on his cutlass. "Another curse, Captain," he said. "You're dragging us deeper into the sea's death." "It's a key," Nathaniel said, his voice calm but resolute. "To the compass, to the truth. Set sail, Amos. The map will show us the way." The eternal dawn raised anchor, her sails catching a sudden breeze as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the sea. The shard pulsed in Nathaniel's hand, its light a match to the compass's hum, and the journal's runes whispered of a final lunar spiral within a star, far beyond the crypt. The crew worked in silence, their glances heavy with doubt, but the ship sailed on, toward a horizon where the sea and sky blurred, and the voice from the deep waited, singing of truths Nathaniel could not yet name. The eternal dawn sailed through a Caribbean night as deep and still as a held breath, her hull cutting through waters that mirrored the stars above. The brigantine's sails caught a faint breeze, their canvas whispering against the creak of timbers, a soft lullaby woven with the rhythmic lap of waves. Lanterns hung from the rigging, their amber glow casting trembling shadows across the deck, where the crew moved with the quiet tension of men who sensed the sea's secrets closing in. The air was warm, heavy with salt, and that strange, sweet undertone, like the ghost of blooms lost to the deep. The mist that had haunted their nights was gone, but the stars seemed brighter, sharper, as if the sky itself were watching. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, though his gray eyes were heavy with the weight of the unknown. The lost compass, locked in his cabin, pulsed in his mind, its spinning needle a restless echo of the voice that haunted his dreams, a lilting call from the deep, a shadow that whispered his name. The journal from the silver wraith, its pages, brittle with warnings, lay beside it, its runes glowing faintly in his memory. The crystalline shard from the siren's crypt, now tucked in his coat, seemed to hum in rhythm with the compass, its light a faint pulse against his chest. Nathaniel's past betrayal. A family lost to fire, and blood clung to him, a tide that no sea could wash away. The map spread before him, marked their course toward a final ruinous spiral within a star, glowing faintly, promising answers or ruin. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, leaned against the mainmast, his broad hands idle, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel with a wariness that had grown into something harder. The crew's trust in their captain was fraying, stretched thin by the shadow ship, the vanishing island, and the shard's unearthly glow. Clara Wren, the navigator, stood at the bow, her sextant glinting as she studied the stars, her face calm but her eyes shadowed with doubt. Old Jim, the cook, huddled near the galley, his knotted rope rosary trembling in his hands, his prayers now a fevered whisper against the sea's mysteries. The crew worked in silence, their hands steady but their glances heavy with fear, their voices hushed by the weight of the unknown. The journal had spoken of the siren's crypt, a place where the sea's heart pulsed, but its warnings grew darker with each page. Elias Crow's final entries, scrawled in trembling ink, haunted Nathaniel. The compass is at death, the shard its seal. The sea gives, but always takes. The shard, with its etched runes, seemed tied to the compass, its light a key to the map's final rune. Nathaniel had traced the spiral within a star, its glow brighter now, as if the sea itself were guiding them to a place where truths and debts converged. Clara's voice broke the silence, soft but edged with caution. She approached the helm, her chart rolled under her arm, her dark hair catching the lantern light. The stars are clear, but they're wrong. The constellations shift, like they did at the island, and the shard it's glowing brighter. In time with the compass, Nathaniel's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the stars seemed to pulse, their light wavering as if seen through water. The map's leading us, Clara, he said, his voice calm but weary. The shard and compass, they're bound to it, to the sea's truth. Her eyes searched his face, doubt flickering in their depths. The crew's breaking, Nathaniel. Tom's been talking of taking the ship, and Amos, he's listening. They say the shard's cursed, that it's calling the shadow. Ship back. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low. Amos will hold them. The sea's testing us, Clara. We're closer than we've ever been. She hesitated, then nodded. Returning to her post, the eternal dawn sailed on, the sea a mirror beneath her, reflecting a sky where the stars seemed to dance, their light bending in ways no sextant could chart. Old Jim emerged from the galley, a tray of hardtack and rum in his hands, his eyes darting to the water. She's singing again, he whispered, his voice trembling. The lady of the deep, calling us to her veil. Nathaniel ignored him, his thoughts on the map's final rune. The journal had hinted at a place called the Starlit Veil, a stretch of sea where the stars touched the water, where the compasses' truth would be revealed. The runa spiral within a star matched a sketch in Elias Crow's hand, beside a warning. The veil shows what you seek, but claims what you are. Nathaniel's fingers brushed the shard through his coat, its warmth a faint burn, as if it knew what lay ahead. As midnight passed, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, not blue like the crypt, nor green like the straits, but a silvery white, like starlight woven into the sea. It pulsed slowly, a beacon in the dark, and the water on it shimmered, as if the stars themselves had fallen. The crew gathered at the rail, their faces pale, their hands tightening on ropes and knives. Amos's spyglass glinted as he studied the glow, his voice low. "It's no land, Captain, it's the sea itself, glowing like a mirror of the sky." Nathaniel's heart quickened. The map had led them here, to the Starlit Veil. "Hold course," he ordered, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. "We'll see what the sea shows us." The eternal dawn drifted closer, the glow spreading, the sea a sheet of liquid starlight. The air grew colder, the stars above brighter. And from the deep came that sound again, the lilting hum, now clear voice. A woman's song weaving through the ship's timbers. It sang of loss and longing, of truth buried in the sea, and Nathaniel felt it stir memories he had buried. A wife's touch, a daughter's laughter, lost to his betrayal. "Captain," Amos said, his voice heavy as he approached the helm. "The men are dead. They won't sail into that light. They say it's the sea's trap, and the shard's the bait." Nathaniel met his gaze, his voice unyielding. "Then they can stay aboard. The compass brought us here, Amos. I'll see what the veil hides." Clara stepped forward, her face resolute. "I'm with you," she said. "The stars led us here. I'll see it through." Nathaniel nodded, gratitude flickering in his eyes. The crew stood back, their eyes on the glowing sea, their hands on their weapons. The eternal dawn drifted into the light, the water shimmered. Beneath her, the stars above seeming to descend, their reflections merging with the sea. The hum grew louder, its voice clear now, a song of names, of debts, of truths that could not be undone. Nathaniel reached into his coat, pulling out the shard and the compass. The shard's runes glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the compass's needle, which now pointed straight into the light. The map, spread on a barrel, showed the spiral within a star, its glow matching the seas. Nathaniel's heart ached, the voice stirring memories of a life he could not reclaim. But he stepped to the bow, the shard and compass in hand, ready to face the veil. As the ship entered the light, the sea seemed to part, revealing a vast, shimmering expanse, a mirror of stars unbroken by wave or wind. The voice sang clear, its words almost intelligible, calling Nathaniel by name. The crew fell silent, their fear giving way to awe, as the eternal dawn sailed into the Starlit Veil. Her hull bathed in light, her course set by a compass that knew no north, only truth. Nathaniel stood at the bow, the shard and compass warm in his hands, the journal's warning echoing in his mind. "The veil claims what you are." The sea sang on, its voice a thread tying him to the unknown, pulling him toward a truth he could not yet name. The eternal dawn sailed deeper, the stars above and below blurring into one. As the night stretched on, heavy with secrets, and the voice from the deep waited, ready to reveal its final song. The eternal dawn drifted through the Starlit Veil, a sea aglow with the light of 1,000 stars, its surface a mirror where sky and water merged into one. The brigantine's sails hung slack, her timbers creaking softly, a weary song woven with the faint ripple of waves against her hull. Lanterns swayed from the rigging, their amber glowed dim against the silvery radiance that bathed the deck, casting shadows that danced like spirits. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of salt, and that strange, sweet undertone, like the memory of flowers drowned in the deep. The crew stood silent, their eyes wide with awe and fear, their hands clutching ropes and knives as if to anchor themselves against the sea's unearthly pull. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the bow, the lost compass in one hand, its pearl face glowing faintly, its needle steady now, pointing into the heart of the veil. The crystalline shard from the siren's crypt pulsed in his other hand, its runes shimmering in time with the sea's light. The journal from the silver wraith, locked in his cabin, haunted his thoughts, its final warning etched in Elias Crow's trembling hand. The veil claims what you are. Nathaniel's past betrayal, a family lost to fire and blood pressed against him, a tide that no sea could wash away. The voice from the deep, lilting and sorrowful, sang clear now, weaving through the ship's timbers, calling his name with a promise of truth or ruin. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood by the mainmast, his broad frame rigid, his hands clenched as if resisting the sea's spell. His loyalty to Nathaniel hung by a thread, frayed by the crew's fear and the shadow of mutiny that loomed like a storm. Clara Wren, the navigator, leaned over the rail, her sextant forgotten, her dark eyes reflecting the starlit sea. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled, betraying the doubt that had grown with each strange sight. Old Jim, the cook, knelt near the galley, his knotted rope rosary pressed to his lips, his prayers a fevered whisper against the sea's song. The crew worked no longer, their tasks abandoned, their gazes fixed on the glowing water, where stars seemed to swim in the deep. The map, tucked in Nathaniel's coat, had led them here to the Starlit Veil, where the final runa spiral within a star glowed with a light that matched the seas. The journal had spoken of this place, a threshold where the sea revealed its truths but demanded a price. The shard, with its etched runes, pulsed in rhythm with the compass, as if they were one, bound to the sea's heart. Nathaniel's purpose, redemption, or at least an answer to the voice that haunted his dreams, drove him forward. But the crew's fear was a weight he could no longer ignore. Captain Amos's voice broke the silence, low and strained as he approached the bow. The men were done. This light, this song, it's no natural thing. They're saying the seas come to collect, and the shards the death. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the glowing sea, his voice calm but heavy. The sea's always taken Amos, but it gives too. The compass led us here. We'll see what it shows. Amos's eyes narrowed, his hand resting on his cutlass. The men won't follow you into this, Captain. They're talking of taking the ship set in course for Nassau. I can't hold them much longer. Nathaniel met his gaze, his voice unyielding. Then let them try. The truth's here, Amos. I'll face it, with or without the crew. Clara stepped forward, her face resolute despite the fear in her eyes. You ascend to the veil, she said softly. I'll see it with you, Nathaniel. The stars led us here, and I'll chart the end. Nathaniel nodded, gratitude flickering in his storm-gray eyes. The eternal dawn drifted deeper into the veil, the sea's light growing brighter, the stars above and below blurring into a single, shimmering expanse. The voice sang louder, its words almost clear, a woman's voice, soft and sorrowful, singing of loss and longing, of debts that bound the soul. It stirred memories Nathaniel had buried, a wife's gentle touch, a daughter's laughter, lost to his betrayal in a night of fire and blood. As the ship moved forward, the glow intensified, the sea a liquid mirror of starlight. The compass's needle held steady, pointing to a point where the light was brightest, a vortex of silver and shadow. The shard's runes pulsed faster, their glow a heartbeat in Nathaniel's hand. The map's final runes seemed to burn in his mind, a spiral within a star, a symbol of the sea's truth. The journal's words echoed, the veil claims what you are. Nathaniel felt the weight of those words, a debt he could not name but could not escape. A shape emerged from the light, a low, rocky outcrop. Not an island, but a fragment of stone rising from the sea, its surface carved with runes that matched the shard and map. The voice grew clearer. It sung a litany of names of lives lost to the sea's hunger. The crew gasped, their fear giving way to awe as the eternal dawn drew closer. Her hull bathed in starlight. The outcrop was no haven, but a shrine, its runes glowing with the same silver light, as if the sea itself had carved them. Drop anchor, Nathaniel ordered, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. We'll go ashore. The crew hesitated, their eyes darting to Amos, who stood silent, his face grinned. Clara's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Nathaniel, the journal warned of a death. This place, it's no treasure. It's a reckoning." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he held the shard and compass firmly. "Then we'll face it," he said. "Lower the boat." He and Clara climbed into the ship's small boat, the crew watching from the deck, their hands on their weapons. Old Jem's prayers grew louder, a chant against the sea's call. As the boat rowed toward the outcrop, the water was still, a mirror of stars, and the voice sang clear, its words a lament for what was lost. Nathaniel's heart ached, the song stirring memories of a life he could not reclaim, a family, a home, a man he no longer was. The outcrop loomed, its runes pulsing in time with the shard. Nathaniel and Clara stepped ashore, their boots crunching, on stones smoothed by centuries of waves. At the center stood a shallow basin, its edges carved with spirals and stars, filled with water that glowed like the sea. The shard fit perfectly, its light flaring as Nathaniel placed it in the basin. The compass's needle trembled, then steadied, pointing directly at the basin's heart. The voice surged, a chorus now weaving through the air, the words almost clear, "Nathaniel, Nathaniel, come to me." His hands shook, the shard and compass warm in his grip, as he knelt by the basin. The journal's warning rang in his mind, "The sea gives, but always takes." He set the shard beside the compass, their runes glowing as one, and the starlit water seemed to pulse, a heartbeat of the sea. A figure appeared in the light, a woman, her form translucent, her eyes like the deep, her hair flowing like seaweed. She reached for Nathaniel, her touch cold as the sea, and the song became a whisper in his ear. "What are you, Nathaniel Vane?" He staggered back, the shard and compass falling into the basin, and the light flared, blinding. As the voice cried out a wail of sorrow and rage, Clara pulled him back, her voice sharp. "Nathaniel, we must go now." They stumbled to the boat, the light pulsing behind them, the voice fading to a whisper. The eternal dawn waited, her crew silent, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. Nathaniel clutched the shard and compass, their glow dimming. As the boat returned to the ship, the anchor was raised, the sails unfurled, and the eternal dawn sailed from the outcrop, the starlit sea closing behind her. The voice lingered, a faint echo, singing of debts and truths. Nathaniel stood at the helm, the shard and compass in his hands, the journals warning a weight in his heart. The veil claims what you are. The sea stretched endless before them, its secrets buried deep. As the eternal dawn sailed toward a horizon where the stars and sea were one, and the voice waited, ready to sing its final truth. The eternal dawn sailed through a Caribbean night as vast and quiet as a dream, her hull gliding over waters that shimmered with the faint glow of stars. The brigantine's sails caught a gentle breeze, their canvas whispering softly, a lullaby, entwined with the creak of timbers and the tender lap of waves against her sides. Lanterns hung from the rigging, their amber light casting warm pools across the deck, where the crew stood in hushed reverence, their eyes tracing the horizon where sea and sky merged into a seamless veil of silver and shadow. The air was cool, laced with the scent of salt and that faint, sweet undertone, like the echo of flowers lost to the deep. The starlit glow of the veil had faded behind them, but its memory lingered, a quiet weight in the hearts of all aboard. Captain Nathaniel Vane stood at the helm, his hands resting lightly on the wheel, his gray eyes softened by a calm that had eluded him for years. The lost compass, now tucked in his coat, no longer hummed, its pearl face dim, its needle still, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. The crystalline shard from the siren's crypt lay beside it, its runes silent, their glow extinguished. The journal from the silver wraith, locked in his cabin, rested quietly, its warnings and runes a story now complete. Nathaniel's past betrayal, a family lost to fire and blood still lingered, but its weight felt lighter, as if the sea had taken part of it into its depths. The voice from the deep, that lilting call that had haunted his dreams, was silent. Now, it saw the memory woven into the stars above. Amos Reed, the quartermaster, stood by the mainmast, his broad frame relaxed for the first time in weeks, his hands resting on a coiled rope. The crew's fear had ebbed, their whispers of mutiny silenced by the light of the Starlit Veil and the truths it had revealed. Clara Wren, the navigator, leaned over a chart at the bow, her sextant glinting in the lantern light, her dark eyes bright with a quiet wonder. She traced the stars, their constellations steady now, guiding the eternal dawn toward familiar waters. Old Jim, the cook, sat cross-legged near the galley, his knotted rope rosary idle in his hands, his face serene as he hummed a sailor's tune, free of prayers or curses. The crew moved with a gentle rhythm, their hands on ropes and sails, their glances no longer heavy with doubt but softened by a shared journey through the unknown. The Starlit Veil had shown Nathaniel not a treasure, but a truth, a mirror of his soul, a reckoning with the man he had been and the man he might yet be. The woman in the light, her translucent form and sorrowful eyes, had not been his lost wife nor a sight, but something deeper, reflection of the sea's heart, or perhaps his own. Her question, "What are you, Nathaniel Vane?" had pierced him, stripping away the layers of guilt and ambition that had bound him. He had sought redemption, a way to quiet the ghosts of his past, but the sea had given him something else, acceptance, a peace that came not from erasing his sins, but from carrying them with grace. The map, now folded in his cabin, had led them through the straits of Tortuga, the rock of the Silver Wraith, the island that wasn't, the Siren's Crypt, and the Starlit Veil. Its final ruinous spiral within a star had glowed in the light of the outcrop, where the shard and compass had merged with the sea's song. The journal's last words, in Elias Crow's trembling hand, echoed in Nathaniel's mind. The sea gives, but always takes. Trust its truth, not its promise. The compass had not pointed to gold or glory, but to a truth Nathaniel had feared to face, that his past could not be undone, but his future could be shaped by the man he chose to be. Captain Clara's voice broke the night's quiet, soft and warm, as she approached the helm. The stars are true again. We're on course for Port Royal, or Nassau if you prefer. The sea's kind tonight. Nathaniel smiled, a rare curve of his lips, his eyes on the horizon. Port Royal, Clara. We've sailed far enough. Let's find a harbor for a time. She nodded, her face softening, and returned to her chart. The eternal dawn sailed on, the sea a gentle cradle beneath her, its surface a canvas of stars broken only by the occasional ripple. Amos approached, his voice low but steady. The men are at peace. Captain, whatever we saw in that light, it's settled in. There is skin where we sail next. Nathaniel's gaze lingered on the sea, its quiet vastness a balm to his soul. Home, Amos, he said softly, or as close as men like us can find. Amos grunted, a hint of a smile in his eyes, and turned back to the crew. Old Jim's tune drifted across the deck, a melody of wind and water mingling with the ship's creaks and the whisper of waves. The crew worked with a quiet joy, their hands steady, their hearts lighter, as if the sea had lifted a burden they had not named. Nathaniel reached into his coat, his fingers brushing the compass and shard. They were cool now, their power spent, or perhaps merely sleeping, waiting for another soul to seek the sea's truths. He thought of the journal, its pages a story of men like Elias Crow, Edward Hawkins, others lost to legend who had sought the compass and found not treasure, but themselves. The sea had taken much from Nathaniel, his family, his peace, his name, but it had given him this: a ship, a crew, a chance to sail toward a horizon unburdened by regret. The stars burned bright, their light a guide through the night, their reflections dancing on the sea. The eternal dawn sailed on, her bow cutting through the gentle waves, toward a harbor where lanterns would glow and voices would call. Nathaniel stood at the helm, the wheel familiar in his hands, the sea a quiet companion. The voice from the deep was gone, its song a memory, but its truth lingered, a whisper that he was enough, that the man he was could sail on, under stars that held no judgment. The horizon stretched endless, a promise of tomorrows yet to come. The eternal dawn creaked softly, her sails catching the breeze, her crew at rest. The sea whispered, not with voices or runes, but with the simple song of water and wind. A lullaby for those who sailed her. Nathaniel's eyes closed for a moment, the stars imprinted on his lids, and he felt the sea's embrace, the gentle tide carrying him toward sleep, toward peace, toward a horizon where the past was a shadow and the future a light, the eternal. Dawn sailed on, her lanterns dim against the starlit sea, her course steady, her heart quiet. The night wrapped her in its velvet embrace, the stars above a silent witness. As the ship moved toward a dawn that waited, soft and unspoken, beyond the edge of the world,